The chair wobbled a little when I sat down, its leg catching on a crack in the patio. No one noticed. I was tucked under the edge of a tree's shade, far enough out of the way that no one had to step around me, but close enough to see the ribbons fluttering and cupcakes being passed. A paper fan rested on my lap, the kind with gold foil edges, but I didn't use it. I just held it there, like it gave me a reason to stay still. My purse sat against my stomach. I kept both hands on it, like maybe if I held it tightly enough, I wouldn't unravel. Laughter burst out from the gift table. Someone had opened a diaper cake and squealed. I smiled. Not because I felt it, but because it's what you do when you're the mother of the woman in white. The breeze was soft, lilac sweet, and the sound of a chair scraping across concrete made me glance over. It wasn't for me. Nothing was. I folded the white napkin on my lap, unfolded it, folded it again. Each crease gave my fingers something to do, something to focus on besides the silence between us. The kind of silence that hums under the music and laughter, louder than anything else. I glanced toward her. She was laughing at something one of her friends said, probably about college or cravings or the color of the nursery. Her laugh had changed. Or maybe it hadn't, and I'd just forgotten how it sounded when it wasn't meant for me. The napkin had softened in my hands, its corners wilted. I stared down at it, gently pressing each fold flat, over and over. I needed to hold something, and this little square of fabric that couldn't flinch or ignore or correct, was the only thing that let me. Just don't say too much, okay? She had whispered in the hallway before we left the house. I remember the way she adjusted her earrings as she said it, not looking at me. The mirror caught both of our reflections, hers, polished and glowing, mine, trying not to let the words bruise too deeply. I smiled and said, "Of course." Because that's what you do when you're trying to be helpful. When you think maybe she's just nervous, when you still hope there's a place for your voice in her day. But now, sitting here, I realized it wasn't nerves. It was preparation, a careful rehearsal of what not to let me become. And the blessing I had written in the back of my mind, just a few lines, tender and short, stayed curled like a forgotten note inside my chest. They handed me a slice of cake, soft pink with strawberries nestled between clouds of white cream. I nodded, said thank you, and took a bite. Sweet. So very sweet. But I barely tasted it. I looked across the yard, saw her laughing with her guests as she cut another piece. Her movements are so confident now, practiced. She didn't even look at me. I used to bake with her every Sunday. Flour dusted the tips of her nose. She'd lean into me while the dough rose, giggling as we peeked through the oven window. She'd ask to lick the spoon, and I'd pretend to protest, but we both knew I'd hand it to her. Now she stood with strangers, slicing into something store-bought, while I sat quietly with ghosts of cinnamon and laughter and little girl giggles, echoing in my chest. Everyone clapped when the diaper guessing game ended. Then someone shared a story from college, and everyone laughed so hard a drink spilled. Someone wiped the table with a napkin, and another cheer erupted. I clapped too. That's what you do. You smile, and you join the sound, even when you're not part of the story. Even when you've never heard the names they mention. They laughed at memories I hadn't lived. I sat in beige shoes, a neutral shape at the edge of the lawn, and realized how far I'd drifted. Or maybe how far she'd gone without me. The tissue was still folded, tucked under my chair. I nudged it closer with my foot. Inside, it was the quilt I'd made her, each square a memory stitched in thread. Her birthday dresses, her favorite flannel nightgown, a patch from her father's old shirt, the corners trimmed with lavender binding. She once told me, reminded her of spring. I had imagined the moment, me holding it up, her eyes filling, maybe even a small gasp. Instead, there was no moment, no right time, no invitation to give. The ribbon came slightly undone in my lap. I fixed, it without looking down. The grass beneath my chair felt cool and soft, but I didn't move. I kept the quilt there, safe from indifference. Safer left unseen. She used to sit behind me on the porch steps, knees pressed into my back, the smell of strawberry shampoo floating in the summer air. I'd close my eyes and feel her tiny fingers tugging gently through my hair, sometimes getting caught, sometimes smoothing it flat. She'd hum, always off-key, usually something she made up on the spot. I never corrected her. I liked the way it sounded, like childhood with no rules. "You'll always be my best friend, Mama," she'd say. I'd laugh softly and answer, "Forever and ever." That porch creaked with every shift of our weight. We'd sit there until the fireflies came out, lighting up the yard like little flickers of magic. The citronella candle burned beside us, mixing with the scent of fresh-cut grass and the warmth of her skin against mine. She always wore that one pajama top, the pink one with the frayed hem and a unicorn missing one eye. I told her I'd stitch it. She said, "Don't. I like it this way." That memory lives in my bones. I still feel her legs hooked behind my waist, still hear her humming in the back of my mind when the house gets too quiet. Back then, she promised me the kind of forever only little girls believe in. And I believed her too. I miss those mornings more than I miss sleep. The light would come in soft and sleepy through the window over the sink, making everything glow just a little golden. I'd stand by the counter, the kettle humming low, butter melting in the pan. The smell of cinnamon toast drifted through the kitchen, warm and sweet, always a little burnt around the edges. She'd shuffle in, hair a mess, dragging her blanket behind her like it was part of her body. She'd sit at the table and swirl her spoon in the cereal milk, drawing lazy circles while cartoons played faintly from the next room. "Why do eggs look like that?" she once asked out of nowhere. I smiled and said, "God wanted breakfast." "To be interesting," she giggled, milk on her chin, and went back to drawing clouds with her spoon. We didn't always talk. Some mornings we just sat. Her eating, me sipping coffee, the toaster popping between us like punctuation. I never knew those quiet minutes would become sacred. I thought I'd get thousands of them. But the last one came without telling me. It was the last. Now the mornings are quiet in a different way. No cartoons, no clouds in the milk. Just me, toast I don't finish, and coffee that stays too hot too long. I still go to her place sometimes, not always. Just when the silence feels too sharp. She sends me photos sometimes, not often. Just enough to say she remembered. Her face is always painted perfectly, lips lined, eyes shadowed in colors I don't recognize. The photos are crisp, clean. The smiles don't reach her eyes. I look at them and wonder, where did my little girl go? I miss the one who cried when her goldfish died. She wore glitter to the grocery store and called herself Princess Rocket, who had chipped nail polish and sticky hands and danced like no one was watching, even when everyone was. Now she posts about brunch with captions like, "Sunday reset." The lighting is cold, the walls behind her stiffer than the smiles. Filtered. Pictures of filtered days, beautiful polished masks. But I can't find her in them. I print the photos anyway, tape them up in the fridge, even when they don't look like her. I tell myself she's in there somewhere, but the truth is, these aren't memories. These are puzzles without all the pieces. Her texts come like business memos. "Thanks. Busy. Can't talk now." Sometimes, just a thumbs-up emoji. I reread them, hoping I missed something, some warmth, some wiggle of affection in the spaces between words. But it's all so clipped, so dry, like she's answering a stranger. I used to get rambling messages at midnight. "Mom, how do you boil pasta again?" Or, "I had a dream about the lake house." I used to be her first voice when something broke, when something bloomed. Now I'm just looped in when she remembers. I sit at the kitchen table with my phone glowing beside a half-full mug. I scroll up through old threads, looking for cracks in the ice, but they're sealed shut. The clock ticks louder these days. The fridge hums like it's trying to keep me company. I'd write her something. Longer if I thought she'd read it. But I've learned. Her silence isn't empty. It's intentional. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow. So slow I didn't even realize I was losing her until I was already alone. First, she stopped calling for recipes. Then birthday plans turned into texted apologies. "Can't come this year, Mom. Work's crazy." The last time, I asked what her favorite song was. She laughed and said, "Mom, you wouldn't know it." She was right. I didn't. I sat with that truth for a long time. I looked through old photo albums, touching her face on the page, trying to remember what she sounded like when she cried. I used to know her cries. She had 3 distinct ones. Now, I don't even know her ringtone. That kind of forgetting doesn't shout. It creeps in, a skipped holiday, a card with no handwritten note, a hug that lasts 1 second too short. I miss being needed, but more than that, I miss being known. Some nights, I hear her. "Mommy," she calls, her voice small and tired. Somewhere, down a hallway that doesn't exist anymore. I rise out of sleep half aware, heart racing, feet already slipping into slippers that never make it to the floor. Then I stopped. It was just a dream. In dreams, she's little again, hair tangled, holding her stuffed bear, cheeks flushed from sleep. She wants water. She wants a story. She wants me. I always say yes in the dream. I always hold her close. But the morning comes, and the hallway stays empty. The only footsteps I hear are my own, padding to the kitchen in the early gray light. I pour the tea. I open the curtains. I whisper, "Good morning," into a room that doesn't answer. Dreams are both a gift and a punishment. Because of them, I'm still her mother, not just by title, but by presence. My love returned, and when I wake, I carry her voice in my chest. Like a song I'm not allowed to hum out loud, I spent months gathering the pieces. Her kindergarten dress, the one with the strawberry buttons, the corner of her old pillow, the one she used to cry into when the night felt too big. A patch of her daddy's flannel from a shirt she wouldn't let go of after he passed. Every square was a memory, stitched not just with thread, but with breath and softness and tears I didn't let anyone see. I laid it out on my sewing table each night, smoothing the fabric like it might speak to me. I stitched while humming the lullabies I once sang when her fever ran high, or when the thunder scared her. I folded it carefully, wrapped it in white tissue, tied it with a soft pink ribbon, and placed it in the basket beside the other gifts. Store-bought, sparkly, all boxed in gold and glitter. She barely touched it. Her fingers grazed the ribbon once, didn't even lift it. My hands stayed folded in my lap, but inside, I was holding that silence tighter than I ever held the gift. I rose to speak. Just a few words, a blessing I'd whispered to myself 12 times. My hands brushed my dress smooth, and I stood, drawing in a slow breath. I looked at her, and for a second, our eyes met. But it didn't feel like a bridge. It felt like a wall. "Mom, just sit." That's all she said, firm, quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't make a sound, but still stings like a slap. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. The words I had, soft, simple things about family and memory, just vanished, like a record skipping in the middle of a song no one wanted to hear. I nodded, maybe smiled. I'm not sure. I sat back down, and that was it. A fork clattered to the ground. Someone cleared their throat. Another picked at the edge of her champagne flute like it needed cleaning. Nobody said a thing. Not one. Some just smiled at their plates. Others suddenly found their phones fascinating. And I smiled too. That fake smile you learn when you're a guest in your own child's life. I kept my back straight, my face pleasant, even as something inside me folded tighter and tighter, like that quilt under the table. The party carried on, games, laughter. Someone started telling a story about a college trip, something about Vegas and a broken heel. The laughter was loud, too loud, forced and bright like tinsel under fluorescent lights. I sat down and folded my hands in my lap. My eyes drifted up to a string of fairy lights above the patio. One bulb flickered, blinking gently like it wasn't sure it still belonged. Everyone else moved on, sipping champagne, passing plates. The joy floated above me like helium balloons slipping from a child's hand. I could see it, but I couldn't hold it. The quilt stayed beneath the table, half hidden beneath the cloth. No one asked about it, not even her. Its corner peeked out, lavender trim, a soft edge of pink cotton with faded glitter still caught. In the seam. I looked at it and thought about the hours I spent humming while I stitched. I remembered how her head used to rest on my shoulder, her breath slowing into sleep, the weight of her so small and so full of trust. And now, all I held was breath. Hold it tight so it wouldn't shake loose and show how much it all hurt. The wind shifted. The ribbon fluttered slightly, bow loosening at the edge. Still no one noticed. I left it there. Not because I forgot, but because I remembered everything. The envelope was blush pink. Her name printed on the corner in a small serif font. Neat. Polite, distant, the kind you order in bulk for announcements or thank you cards. I turned it over in my hand and felt the slight bump of the seal. For just a second, I let myself pretend it was something more. A note. A line or two of warmth. Maybe even, I'm sorry, I opened it slowly. The paper inside was thick, fancier than it needed to be. One line printed across the center. Thank you for coming. It meant a lot. That was all. No, love, Emily. No mention of the gift. No mention of me. I ran my fingers across the paper, tracing the indentation of the ink. It felt cold, like a receipt for something I never bought. I held it in both hands for a long moment, hoping the warmth of my palms could pull something else out of it. A second sentence, a postscript, anything. But it stayed quiet. Outside, rain streaked slowly down the window, making the trees blur together. And I sat there, envelope in my lap, pretending it hadn't landed like a stone in my chest. I read it again, slowly, as if maybe I missed something between the words. No mention of the quilt. Not the ribbon. Not the hours I stitched by lamplight, humming old lullabies she'd long forgotten. It was as if I hadn't brought anything at all. As if love, when wrapped in fabric, didn't count the same as things with barcodes and gift receipts. For a moment, I told myself maybe someone forgot to pack it with the others. Maybe it never made it home. Maybe it had been misplaced. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew. It made it home. It just didn't make it matter. I picked up the card again, feeling its weight. It was light, barely heavier than air. But it carried so much emptiness. And there was no warmth in that envelope. Only distance. I stood slowly, the envelope still in my hand, and walked to the desk in the corner of the room. The drawer creaked softly as I opened it. Inside were all the others. Cards from past holidays, quick birthday notes, a postcard from her honeymoon in Napa, the one I wasn't invited to. I placed this one at the back and straightened the pile. Lined them up like bones. They didn't say much, any of them, but I kept them anyway. Proof that she used to write. At some point she remembered my address. Maybe she used to know how to reach me, or maybe I had just convinced myself she did. I closed the drawer gently, the soft click of it shutting echoing louder than I meant it to. I stood still for a second, staring at the brass knob, wondering when love had started arriving, pre-written, sealed, and nearly blank. The room was quiet, except for the way those letters rustled faintly behind the wood, like they were trying to speak but couldn't. I unfolded the quilt and laid it over my knees, not for warmth, though the house was a bit chilly, but because I needed to feel something she once touched. Each square I knew by heart. I traced them slowly, the pink gingham from her first Easter dress, the navy corduroy from her 5th grade music recital, a scrap from the baby blanket I once carried everywhere, frayed at the edge where she'd chewed it as a toddler. My fingertips lingered over the flannel pocket that had belonged to her father's shirt, the one she clutched at his funeral, silent, eyes too big for her age. I closed my eyes. These were the only parts of her I still recognized, the small girl sewn into cloth. Before silence stretched between us, before everything became so polished and pretty and unrecognizable. The tea beside me had gone cold. I didn't mind. I wasn't thirsty. Outside, rain tapped gently on the roof, the kind of rain that doesn't demand anything, just arrives and stays. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, like a thought I didn't want to finish. I rocked slowly in my chair, back and forth, the quilt rising and falling across my knees like breath, and in that moment, the fabric felt more alive than the letters ever had. The fabric didn't ask anything of me, didn't flatter or wound. It just held me, and for a moment, I let it, she wrote. It meant a lot. Just 4 words. I read them again as the room dimmed. The sky outside turned purple-gray, the kind of color that blurs the edges of everything. The teacup on the table let off its last curl of steam. Soft goodbye, it meant a lot. But she didn't tell me. She didn't say my name. She didn't say anything about the chair I wobbled in, or the napkin I folded until it went soft. Not a mention of the quilt, or the way I stood, trying to speak, only to be told to sit. I think what she meant was, the party meant a lot. The decorations, the photos, the flowers and favors and cupcakes with tiny rubber ducks on top. The things that looked good in pictures. I wasn't in many of those. Some thank yous don't heal. They just echo, like the hollowness of an empty room. You call out and wait for a voice, but what comes back is only your own. I set the card down. I didn't need to read it again. It didn't close the wound. It just gave it a name. The door creaked like it always had, and there stood Marcia, blueberry, pie in her hands, still warm, wrapped in that faded dish towel with the stitched cherries on the corner. She smiled, that knowing kind of smile, like she had already read the weather inside my chest before stepping in. It's fresh out of the oven, she said. It smells like 1989, I laughed. She walked in without waiting for permission, like she always used to. Set the pie on the counter, unwrapped it slowly like it was a gift. The smell of sugar and cinnamon rose up between us, curling into the air like a memory neither of us had to say out loud. Outside, the wind bell chimed once. Inside, we didn't need to rush. For a little while, we weren't the women our children forgot. We were just 2 old friends with pie and time and silence that didn't hurt. We sat at the kitchen table with mugs cradled between our palms. The pie sat between us, mostly untouched. Funny how we both had sweet things right in front of us and no appetite to match. I saw Jacob last week, she said, her eyes on the window. He barely looked up from his phone, just dropped off the groceries and left. I didn't say anything, just nodded. That was enough. We didn't speak in straight lines anymore, just little curves and soft corners, pieces of stories that didn't need conclusions. I think they forget we were people before them, she added. I reached across the table, not to take her hand, just to place mine near it. The sunlight spilled across the table in long rectangles, catching dust in the air. We watched it quietly, letting it speak for us. Sometimes the only ones who understand are the ones who bleed the same kind of quiet. Marcia took a long sip of her tea, then leaned back and looked at me gently. She's been rewriting the story, hasn't she? My breath caught. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the pie, then the floor, then my hands. They were still, too still. I nodded. She tells people I was controlling, that I hovered, that I smothered her. Marcia didn't flinch. Mine said the same. I think they need someone to explain their distance, someone to blame. It wasn't cruel. She said it softly. Honest. Still, it hurts to hear it out loud. I wondered, suspected. I'd felt it in the way my daughter introduced me, like a footnote. I'd seen it in the way she left out certain pieces when telling stories that I remembered. So differently. They don't just forget, I whispered. They revise. And that was the moment I felt it, like my reflection had been replaced, and I didn't know the woman she described anymore. I used to think silence was mercy, that giving her space was loving her well. I told myself that not saying anything was grace, letting her grow, letting her figure it out without hovering. But silence isn't always noble. Sometimes it's just absence. And in my absence, she rewrote the story. I left space, and she filled it in. I didn't correct her when she made comments that bent the truth. I thought she'd grow out of it. I thought it didn't matter. But it did. Now the version of me she carries around isn't the woman who sewed her Halloween costumes or stayed up with her during storms. It's a stranger, a ghost mother who hovered too long, said too much, and I let her create it, because I didn't want to be the kind of mom who fought to be seen. Marcia touched the recipe card that had fluttered loose on the counter. You didn't erase yourself, she said. You just didn't realize she'd pick up the pen. I took a bite of the pie and didn't expect the grief. It came soft and then sharp. Sweet berries, warm crust, and a weight behind it that surprised me. I swallowed slowly, blinking back. The sting behind my eyes. This is good, I said, clearing my throat. I used real butter. Marcia smiled, but I couldn't answer right away, because I wasn't tasting just the pie. I was tasting a birthday from years ago. One where I baked this same kind. One where I stood behind the camera instead of sitting beside her. One where she blew out candles while I cleared the plates. Set my fork down. Marcia tilted her head. It's not the pie, is it? I shook my head, and for once, I didn't try to explain it. I just let the tears come. Not loud, just slow. It wasn't crumbs on my cheek I wiped away. It was years, unspoken, unshared, and quietly breaking open at the table. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't even hover over her name in my phone like I usually did. I just stopped. Not to punish, not to prove a point. I stopped because the silence finally felt safer than the guessing. And sometimes, the loudest thing a mother can do is go still. The house feels different when you're not waiting on anything. The ceiling fan hummed softly above me. The curtains barely moved, and the cup of tea on the table cooled untouched. It had been hot when I poured it, but I never got around to drinking it. I stared at the screen of my phone once, just once. Her name still starred as a favorite, still there, but I didn't tap it. Instead, I listened to the sound of my own breath, the ache in my own chest, the steadiness of my own choice. It wasn't revenge. It was a retreat. And in that hush, I finally heard something I'd lost. Myself. David's office didn't smell like home. It smelled like lemon polish, fresh paper, and decisions. The nameplate on the door didn't hold memory. Just credentials, just order. But somehow, stepping through it gave me something my own kitchen no longer could. A seat at the table where my voice didn't feel like a burden. He looked no older than my daughter. His hair was neat. His glasses kept slipping down his nose. But his eyes, they were kind, soft in a way that didn't pity me. Take your time, he said as he gestured to the chair. I pulled out a manila folder from my bag. It was thicker than I remembered. Inside were pieces of a story I hadn't been allowed to tell. Letters I never sent, receipts from Christmases she swore she celebrated alone. He didn't ask why I brought them. He just waited. I wasn't a mother here. I was a client, and oddly, That felt like respect. I laid out the papers carefully, like a trail of breadcrumbs leading back to the woman I used to be, old property deeds, handwritten notes I never mailed, birthday cards with stamps that never saw the post office, a copy of her birth certificate, with a crease down the middle from years of folding and unfolding it. David looked through each one slowly, not scanning, reading. This, I said, tapping the corner of a yellowed letter, was the first time I tried to explain things. She never read it. I kept it anyway. I smoothed a receipt. This was the coat I bought her when she said she didn't feel seen. Each item felt small alone, but together they built a kind of timeline, a quiet one. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady, real. Proof that I had tried, I had shown up, in every way that didn't seem to count to her. But maybe this stack of quiet evidence, maybe it would hold longer than memory. Maybe ink could carry the weight my voice never could. David asked gently, "What would you like to change?" I paused for a moment. I looked down at the folder again, then out the window. "I don't want her to lose anything," I said. "I just want to be acknowledged." He nodded slowly. We worked on the trust, together. Not in anger, but with care. I asked for clauses, not restrictions, not traps, just small anchors of kindness. If she wanted the house, she'd have to sit down with me first. If she wanted the heirlooms, she'd have to hear the stories that went with them. I didn't want to punish her. I just didn't want to disappear. And in a world that prizes efficiency and estate planning, I was building a different kind of will, one with meaning. One that spoke. Because love, real love, shouldn't be left to interpretation. Sometimes it needs to be written down in black and white. When the final page slid across the desk toward me, I stared at it for a long time. My name was printed at the bottom in soft gray ink. A dotted line waited beneath it. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake, but my heart did. I wrote each letter slowly, pressing into the paper like I was sewing something permanent. Not a quilt this time, but something with weight. Something binding. Not in cloth, but in consequence. It wasn't the kind of signature I ever thought I'd need. Not for my child. Not for the one I used to rock through teething and heartbreak and fevered dreams. But here I was, writing my name beneath a version of the truth she refused to see. When I finished, I didn't smile. I didn't sign. I just sat quietly and placed the pen down, because when a mother signs against the memory her child has made of her, it's never just ink. It's a farewell to the idea that love alone was ever enough. It started with paper plates and a shy wave across the fence. "Come by if you're hungry," someone had called out that first Sunday, lifting a spatula with a hopeful grin. I brought my potato salad in the old blue bowl, same one I used for every church picnic when my girl was little. I didn't expect much, maybe a plate of ribs and a little sun, but I stayed, and the next week I came again. Then, the next, by the 5th Sunday, someone saved me a seat. Same spot under the oak tree, where the leaves filtered the light just enough to make you feel like the world softened for a while. The children played with bubbles, their laughter chasing through the air like music. Folding chairs creaked gently as people leaned back, shared stories, and passed mustard. I hadn't been needed in a long time. But here, on these plastic chairs with paper plates in our laps, I felt useful again. I felt seen. They ran wild with chalk-covered fingers and watermelon. Smiles, sticky hands, popsicle-stained shirts, laughter that bounced like beach balls in the breeze. One of them, no older than 3, wandered right up to me and climbed onto my lap without asking, like she knew, like somehow she could feel that my arms had once rocked someone just her size. Her curls tickled my chin. Her cheeks were flushed, and her mouth was smeared red from fruit. I reached into my purse and gently wiped her face with the corner of a napkin. She didn't flinch. She leaned in. I smiled. No one told her to come to me. She just did, and I didn't need permission to love her back. It's a strange thing, the way little ones trust. The way they crawl into laps like hearts, still remember what comfort feels like. At that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like a mother again. Someone passed me a slice of pie and asked for my banana bread recipe. "I hear yours doesn't even need eggs," she said, eyes wide. "It doesn't," I laughed, "but it does need patience." Another woman leaned in and asked, "How did you raise your daughter all on your own?" "I can barely manage with a partner." I didn't freeze. I didn't deflect. I shared. I told them about jobs I worked and mornings I braided hair half asleep, and nights when love looked like hot soup and clean socks. And they listened. Really listened. No one flinched when I spoke. No one interrupted. No one asked me to just sit. My voice didn't bounce off the walls like it used to. It didn't echo into silence. It landed. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't second-guess myself after saying something out loud. I let my voice stay in the room, and it stayed. I told them the story of the flower snowman. One winter, my daughter couldn't stand that it didn't snow, so she grabbed a sack of flour and built a snowman on the porch, little hat, twig arms, buttons and all. We were sneezing for days, but we laughed until our stomachs hurt. They laughed too. Real laughter. The kind that makes people lean forward, that crinkles eyes and lifts shoulders. And I laughed with them, my hands resting on the table, still remembered. The dusting of flour that always seemed to cling to my knuckles in those days. I looked down at them now, older, quieter, softer, and I smiled. Those stories still lived in me. They hadn't gone stale, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel foolish for remembering. I felt full. That night, I thought about writing to her. I even pulled out the stationery she gave me for Christmas years ago. The one I'd only used twice. I wanted to tell her about the toddler who called me Miss Nana, about the neighbor who made lemonade with too much sugar, the way she used to, about how I'd laughed again. Really laughed. I wrote the letter, folded it neatly, slid it into the envelope with careful fingers. I even sealed it, but I didn't. Mail it. I set it down beside my teacup and watched the breeze lift the edge of the envelope like it was asking, "Are you sure?" Some invitations aren't meant to be delivered. Some are just meant to prove that the door in your heart still opens, that even when it hurts, you're still capable of hope. And I was, still am. It wasn't pink or floral or familiar, just a plain, white envelope with a clean printed return address in the top left corner. David's office, not mine. I imagined her fingers hesitating for only a moment before she opened it. Probably at the kitchen island, in between emails or baby formula. Maybe she thought it was another quiet gesture of mine, another check, another piece of love disguised as help. But this wasn't that. Inside, there were no warm notes, no handwritten lines, just legal pages. Quiet, but firm. Not cruel. Just clear. Boundaries, not bitterness. The envelope was stiff. So was the silence around it. But it didn't feel angry. It felt final. Like a door closing slowly, not to trap, but to separate space that had been blurred for too long. And for the first time, I didn't send softness. I sent the truth. That house was never just brick and wood. It was scraped knees on hardwood floors. Giggles echoing down the hallway, the dent in the drywall from when she spun too fast in socks and bumped into the corner. It was her first step, her first heartbreak. I sat on the kitchen floor more than once, holding her while she cried about things that felt like the end of the world. The bedroom still held marks from glow-in-the-dark stars she once taped to the ceiling. The backyard still had the garden patch where she buried her goldfish and planted daisies above it, saying, "Now he'll be flowers." It wasn't just a deed. It was a story, and now she wanted it, clean and signed, like a transaction, like it came without memory. I needed her to know. Inheritance doesn't come without recognition. You don't receive what you refuse to remember. She wanted a house, but I needed her to remember who made it home. David looked up from the draft, pen in hand, and asked softly, "Anything else you wanted to say?" I hesitated. Then I whispered, "Just that she has to talk to me. Not because I wanted to grovel, not because I wanted control, just words, real ones, not over text. Not during holidays with a timer running. If she wanted the house, she needed to speak to the woman who made it hers in the first place. That was the clause. Not harsh, not cold, just named." David nodded, clicked his pen, wrote it down like it was any other term. But I knew it wasn't. It was my heart, typed in legal language, a final plea not to be shut out of the ending. As I brushed my fingers across the paper, it felt like brushing the hair from her forehead when she was 5. Soft, careful, hoping. She wouldn't pull away. I didn't leave that office with revenge in my hands, just a sense of clarity I hadn't known I needed. This wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about taking anything from her. It was about giving something back to myself. For years, I'd let her rewrite me into the quiet one, the outdated one, the woman who didn't understand. And I let it happen because I thought love meant letting go without question. But love isn't erased. Love is showing up. Love is being remembered. Not for perfection, but for presence. She'd forgotten who I was. So I held up a mirror. Not to wound her, but to remind her that love doesn't disappear just because it makes someone uncomfortable. I tucked my coat around my shoulders as David stacked the signed papers into a neat pile. The only sound was the soft rustle of the manila folder sliding closed. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't cold. It was weighted, with truth. I hope she opened it slowly. I hope she didn't rush through it between appointments or emails. I hope she didn't skim it like a bill or hand it off to someone else. I hope she sat down, that she read it with her full attention. I hope her hands trembled just a little, not with fear, but with recognition. I hope she paused when she reached the clause. I hope she whispered, "Oh," and I hope she felt me there. Not as a warning, not as a wall, but as a mother who had been soft for too long, who had whispered for too long, who had finally chosen to speak in a language her daughter would have to read, ink instead of voice, black and white instead of shrinking and smiling. I didn't want to scare her. I just wanted her to hear me, and if she needed legal paper to do that, then so be it. I closed the office door behind me. The hallway echoed gently as I walked out, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt written. I heard the footsteps first. Slow, hesitant, familiar. The creak of the first porch step made my breath catch. The second one made my fingers still against my teacup. I didn't turn toward the sound. I couldn't. Some moments you meet, with stillness, not speed. The baby cooed before she spoke, just a little sigh, soft and high and full of life. Then she stepped into view. She was holding her. Wrapped in the quilt I thought she'd forgotten, the one I stitched with every memory she once swore she cherished. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't see distance. I saw a daughter. I didn't move. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew this moment didn't need anything rushed or said too soon. It needed space, reverence. The wind picked up a little, rustling the golden leaves on the sidewalk. Somewhere, someone's chimney carried the scent of wood smoke through the air. She stood there on my porch, baby in arms, history in her eyes, and all I could do was hold the ache still and wait. She walked over slowly, her arms full, of a baby, of quilt, of everything we hadn't said. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I looked down at the quilt wrapped tightly around the little one, the same soft fabric I'd folded and tucked beneath a party table not so long ago. And now, here it was. Here she was. She sat down beside me on the porch swing. The baby shifted gently in her arms, thumb curled beneath her chin. I watched her fingers move across the edge of the blanket, tracing a square of pink gingham from her old Easter dress, brushing the corner of the blue flannel that once belonged to her father. She didn't speak, but I could see it in the way. Her fingertips lingered. She finally understood. It wasn't just fabric. It was forgiveness. It was an apology. It was home. That quilt spoke louder than any card ever could, and for the first time in all those silent months, I heard her heart again. She didn't ask if she could lean into me. She just did. She pressed into my side like she used to when she was little, when thunder scared her or the flu kept her up all night. No words, no ceremony. She just let go. Her arms curled under mine, and then the first sob broke. Quiet, heavy. Her tears soaked through the fabric of my blouse, warm and endless. Her body trembled against me, and I held her the way I'd always known how, without questions, without demands. Just arms open. I brushed her hair back from her face, the same way I did when she was 8 and had a fever, crying because she thought I might leave the room too soon. The baby stayed nestled between us, a calm heartbeat in the middle of all, that breaking. The porch swing creaked beneath us, steady as a breath, and I sat there, rocking gently, while my daughter wept all the years we hadn't dared to speak. Some crying isn't for fixing. It's for remembering where you're still allowed to fall apart. Her voice was so small, I almost didn't catch it. I didn't know how to say sorry, she whispered, but I felt it, deep in my chest, like a hand reaching across time and silence. I didn't need her to say it louder. I didn't need her to say anything else. She was here. She was holding on. She wasn't pretending anymore. I kept one hand gently pressed against her back. I could feel the shiver in her breath, the way her chest rose and fell like she hadn't exhaled in months. The baby stirred and yawned, tiny fingers curling against the edge of the quilt. I didn't know, she said again, how to come back. You just did, I thought, but I didn't say it yet. The wind picked up, wrapping around us like a second shawl. Our teacups sat untouched on the porch rail, cooling quietly, the steam now just a memory. The sky was painted in streaks of pink, and gold, like everything above us, had paused, too, just to witness. I stroked her back the way only a mother does, slow, rhythmic, familiar. She clung a little tighter, her head resting on my shoulder like it belonged there. Like maybe, despite everything, she knew it always had. I'm sorry, she whispered again, softer this time. Almost like she didn't need me to answer. But I did. I leaned in and said it gently, just above the crown of her head. You just did. I didn't need her to explain the months, or the silence, or the way she'd walked past the quilt that day without a glance. I didn't need to reopen the wound. Not tonight. The baby made a soft, contented noise between us. Her tiny hand had found my scarf and was gripping it like a thread of connection. The porch was still, except for the swing and the slow movement of the wind. A candle flickered gently beside the tea tray, its light dancing on the rim of the cups. We didn't talk after that. We just stayed. And in that stillness, something shifted, like a stitch finally pulling tight. Not perfect, but whole. The papers lay flat on the kitchen table, edges squared, pages still warm from the printer. The sun pooled across the wood, soft and golden, like it had paused to witness something sacred. A breeze came in from the open window, just enough to lift the corner of the last page. I reached to steady it, and my hand didn't tremble this time. Not like it did the first time I signed a version of this will. Back then my chest tightened with grief. This time, it didn't. My name curled across the bottom of the page with quiet purpose. The ink smudged slightly beneath my ring finger, but I didn't mind. It made it feel more human. There was no bitterness in the signature. Just breathe. Just resolve. I pressed the pen to the table gently, its weight suddenly light, and I sat still, feeling something settle inside me that I hadn't known was waiting. Forgiveness, maybe. Or maybe just the sense that, for once, I wasn't writing from fear. I was writing from peace. Each box was labeled in my handwriting, neat, steady, thoughtful, not just with names, but with stories. Grandpa's harmonica, first played at our wedding. Mom's necklace, given the day she got her first job. Porch photo, 1994, daisies behind the ear. I didn't want her to inherit clutter. I wanted her to inherit meaning. The kitchen felt hushed but full, drawers opening and closing with soft clicks, the quilt half folded over the back of a chair like it was listening. I tied ribbons around letters I'd written over the years. Some she'd never seen, some she never would unless she chose to. The house stayed hers. I didn't change that. But now it came with one condition: memory with mercy. She had to remember how it was built. Not just cleaned or painted, but built. With hands that worked long hours, with backs bent in gardens, with lullabies sung into midnight air. Inheritance wasn't just about things. It was about understanding. And I wanted her to receive not only the keys, but the weight behind them. There was nothing loud in this version, no harsh clause, no hidden trap, just kindness, wrapped in firm lines and steady margins. I had found a way to speak without raising my voice. The kitchen clock ticked behind me as I placed the final copy in the drawer. The pen rested beside a folded cloth napkin, the one she used to tuck into her shirt collar when she helped me bake. I wasn't writing rules. I was writing in my presence. This wasn't control. This was clarity, a reminder that I had lived here. I love it here. Raised and hoped and tried here. And now, even if she never spoke of me again, these pages would. They would whisper, not shout. I was here. I mattered. And not just in memory, but in the lines of something binding. Not to force her, just to remind her it's still there, David's business card, tucked right under the recipe box, beside the old note card for banana bread I still know by heart. I see the card sometimes when I reach for cinnamon or cloves. The edges are a little soft now, but the print is still clean. Still clear. I don't keep it there in case I need to call again. I keep it because it reminds me. Not everything loud is strong, and not everything quiet is weak. Some things endure quietly, like pie crusts that hold together after years, or decisions, made in soft afternoon light with no witnesses but your own breath. That card reminds me I didn't disappear. I chose to remain, not shouting, just steady. Sometimes power doesn't arrive with a bang. Sometimes it just stays. The house was quiet, except for the soft groan of the floorboards settling beneath evening. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea warm between my hands, the steam curling gently upward like it had nowhere else to be. The will sat folded beside me, not heavy, not sharp, just whole. This version wasn't born from pain. It was built from the bones of love that had withstood silence, misunderstanding, and distance. I didn't need to be remembered as the perfect mother. I just needed to be remembered as real, a mother who showed up, who sewed things together when they tore, who stayed, even when the room emptied out, who, finally, spoke. The porch light clicked on outside. A slow glow spread across the grass, catching the edge of the garden she used to dig in, barefoot, humming, songs she never finished. I smiled without trying, because love, when written right, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to last. If you've ever had to speak your love a little louder, just to be seen, I hope you felt something familiar in my story. I'm still learning that quiet doesn't mean invisible. If you are too, you're not alone. I'd be honored if you subscribed and shared your story below.